Welcome to Mind My Age, presented by Total Life. I'm your host, Neelam Brar. Today we have a remarkable guest, Dr. Kate Lund, a licensed clinical psychologist, performance coach, and TEDx speaker with more than 15 years of experience. Dr. Lund has specialized training in medical psychology from Harvard-affiliated hospitals and is an adjunct instructor at Pasteur University. She's also the author of Putter and the Red Car and Bounce, Help Your Child Build Resilience and Thrive in School, Sports, and Life. Additionally, Dr. Lund is a therapist with Total Life, working with older adults. Welcome, Dr. Lund.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Me too. At Mind My Age, we believe that your mind controls your health. So we like to ask all of our guests, how old do you feel and why?
Oh boy, that's a great question, right? And I will say that I feel younger than I really am. So I would say that I don't feel a day over 40, even though I'm many days over 40. And I think that's because, I've got 16-year-old twin boys. I need to keep up with them, engage, and kind of be, a resilient parent in that way. And I think that helps keep me young. I'm active. Extremely active, engaged in fitness, sports, always on the golf course when I have a moment, and just try to stay engaged. And that's why I think I feel younger than I really am.
I love that. I mean, it's all about your mindset. And so you obviously put that into display with the actions you take. Dr. Lund, can you start by telling us a bit about your background and what really, through all of your research and studies, has been the most shocking observation you've had and how you apply that in your field?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. I've been a clinical psychologist for just about 20 years now, and have been really fascinated by this idea of resilience and how we work, move through and beyond challenge. But for me, it's more than that. It's how do we build that resilient mindset? How do we integrate the factors, the variables, the characteristics of resilience into our day-to-day such that we can not only move through and beyond challenge when it arises, but that we can just flourish within our own unique context overall and in general, and be the best that we can be regardless of what's happening externally. And, I'm trying to think of what's the most shocking thing. I really am interested in the human experience and understanding these ideas across the continuum of the human experience. And it's one of my focuses, in addition to working as a therapist for Total Life and working with individual clients sort of from another angle. I have a podcast called The Optimized Mind, and there is where I explore these ideas. And it's just really fascinating to me how we all put these ideas of resilience and what it means to us into play in a different way. And it's that understanding our own unique context, I think, that's the most important in that.
So the word resilience has a lot of meanings, and you've worked with students, athletes, parents, and older adults to help them reach their full potential at any age, any background. What is the common thread when you think about resilience training and coaching and advice that links all of these different types of people with different motivations and different challenges?
Yeah, well, I think the most sort of the thread that weaves it all together, the thing that's most important, couple things, it's understanding and appreciating your own unique context and not comparing ourselves to others and not sort of gauging our ability to move through and beyond challenge, not gauging our ability to flourish, overcome challenge based on what anyone else is doing, but rather from the inside out in terms of what we're doing and where we want to go. And the other piece that's really, really important in all of this is believing in possibility and being able to hold on to that notion of possibility on the other side of challenge. I think those are the two most important kind of pieces that hold all of this together when it comes to resilience.
I've seen this with my own parents. There's so many challenging moments that arise as they're aging, from health changes to loss, to reflection on the meaning of life or what's to come. How what is your advice to folks that are kind of just seeing a mountain of challenges, when it comes to thinking about being resilient?
Yeah, and that's a great question, right? And it's a very real question and fits very much into what many people out there are experiencing, older adults. My mom, same situation that you're describing with your parents. And so I think it's a question of one, holding on to that possibility on the other side of challenge, but also really taking that step back and discerning, well, so I've got a lot of challenges in my life right now, but what are the things that are going well? And how can I use those to maximize my potential or my forward direction, so to speak? How can I use the things that are going well to help me move forward in that direction that I want to go? And that's one thing that I really work with a lot of my clients on, is sort of identifying those things and finding those things. And, there can be many ways to do that, but a process that I really like is called the daily wins exercise, where folks really take time intentionally to reflect at the end of each day on 3 to 5 things that went well that day, because it's so easy for us to get caught up in that kind of negative thought loop of, well, I should be doing this better, or this should be going better than it is, or why aren't these people in my life doing things that I think they should be doing, that kind of thing. And it's really easy to get stuck there. But by intentionally taking a step back and jotting down 3 to 5 things that are going well, or did go well on a given day, really helps us shift our perspective and shift it back to neutral, or even in a more positive direction. And so that's really how I would answer that question.
So let's go deeper on that. 3 to 5 things. What would be yours yesterday?
What would be mine yesterday? Well, so and it can be anything, right? It can be sort of across the continuum. And that's the thing that I think is most important. So for me yesterday, it was this amazing walk I took with my 2-year-old Brittany Doodle named Wally, along the water, spent time on the beach, just really served to, make me feel good in those moments, and then reflecting back on it later in the day. Other piece would be, got my third weight training workout in, and that's something that I'm really trying to improve on. Right, is adding functional strength training into my overall fitness routine, and that's well underway. And related to fitness and nutrition, I hit my protein goal for the day. And so those are the 3 things for me, which I guess give you a little insight into who I am as a person, on a human level. But yeah, those are the 3 things.
For me, they are, for yesterday. That is, I called my family. I've been trying to make a much bigger effort to connect daily with them, and cherish the moments we have. Second, I got my 8 hours of sleep in. Again, something I really try to prioritize, so it's a win when I get it. And 3, similar to you, eating balanced, avoiding the junk food. It can get tough sometimes, but it's a win at the end of the day. And you're right, it can be a small win or a big win.
Exactly. Yeah, those are great, right? And again, yours give us all insight into you as a human being. And I love that, right? And I love the fact that, jotting down these wins helps with the reflection. But you make another really good point in that, and this is another thing I really encourage my clients to do a lot, is to focus on those small wins, right? Oftentimes folks want to get from point A to point Z all at once and forget to focus on the process and on the positive parts of the process. And so really focusing on what it takes to get from point A to point B and focusing in on those small wins, I think is really powerful.
Which is interesting because in your recent TEDx talk, you talked about the idea of being ordinary and that being a superpower for building resilience. What do you mean by that?
Finding the ordinary within the extraordinary. And so for me, that concept originated from my own experience as a child, growing up with a medical condition called hydrocephalus, which is essentially where the cerebrospinal fluid isn't circulating as it should, causing pressure to build up on the brain. And so that condition is managed with something called a shunt. And so I was in and out of the hospital a lot as a kid, as a result of that condition. So in and out of school, not feeling ordinary really on any level. And so really for me, it became finding that ordinary, focusing on what I could do as opposed to what I couldn't do, and really learning from that experience to appreciate my own unique challenge, my own unique context, and to be able to see the possibilities that were out there for me on the other side of the challenges. And I think the more we can appreciate our own unique context without that sense of comparison, the easier it is to build up and move towards our potential. And our potential in this case would be the extraordinary, right? And our ordinary is appreciating who we are within our own unique context.
The question I have that comes to mind is, as you speak about ordinary and extraordinary, every day also has challenges. And so while it's important to identify and celebrate the little wins, what do you do about all of the things that went wrong that day?
Right. And that's a huge point. And that's a really valid, real scenario. And that's what I'm always talking to folks about as well, in that, by sort of this idea of focusing on the good and focusing on what's going well and all of that, that doesn't negate the very real reality for all of us that the challenge is inevitable. And we're going to face numerous challenges each and every day, that we're going to have to circumvent. We're going to have to move through and beyond. But by doing that, taking that other step of focusing on the things that did go well, it helps shift that lens, right? It helps make sure that we're not getting stuck in the challenge. Because when we get stuck in the challenge, that's when we get bogged down. That's when, we start to develop, mood related challenges, our anxiety might go up, all of those things. So definitely we have to manage through and beyond those inevitable challenges that we're all going to face every single day. But trying to balance the impact of that by looking at the other side of the coin is also very important.
What are some of the practical steps, in addition to identifying the 3 or 5 positive wins, that older adults can be taking to build resilience when things feel overwhelming and tough in their daily lives?
Yeah, so we really want to be focusing on those self-care practices, really taking time out to think about, okay, what is important to me from a self-care perspective, such that it'll help me to function at my best? Where are my hobbies? Where are my passions? How can I carve time out each day to engage in one or more of those things? Am I thinking about maximizing or optimizing my sleep, for example, nutrition? Am I focused on being physically active? Because we know that physical activity is just as effective as medication for many people experiencing mild to moderate anxiety or depression. So really that focus on movement, again, though, within your own unique context, right? Because not everybody is able to move in the same ways based on maybe things that are going on with health or other aspects of their life or experience. So really optimizing those self-care practices within your own unique context is vital. Another thing that's really important, really, really important, and I work with all of my clients on this, is this idea of stress management or modulating your stress response consistently each and every day. Because the whole thing is, if we're starting up here with our stress and a challenge hits, we're probably going to escalate to the point of maybe shutdown. And that's not going to help us. So we want to maintain an even baseline of sort of stress and stress modulation such that when a challenge hits, we're able to ride it more like a wave and we're not going to get escalated to the point of shutdown. So that's huge, stress modulation. The other thing that's really important and helpful is social connection and making sure that we're fostering connection with others. Maybe it's a coffee with a friend. Maybe it's a phone call with a family member. It can be any number of things, but social connection is very important.
One of the things that I don't think the media talks enough about is how much social media has penetrated the older adult population and how addicted some folks are. Like, I look at my mom every day and we literally have to peel that phone out of her hand. Most times I lose at that battle, and she just spends hours and hours sitting on the couch on Facebook when we want her to be walking around and engaging. And she doesn't understand that there's algorithms that are like feeding her information. She doesn't understand that. And so, what's your message or advice? Like, how would you handle that with my mom or any patient that is not having trouble overcoming that?
Right. And that's a great question. And it's a very real scenario, right? For many of us, older adult or otherwise. And it's really hard. And it's about habit building behavior, right? We want to undo that habit of sitting for hours on end on the couch, glued to social media. And so it's starting with small steps, really encouraging small steps, maybe putting the phone down and taking a 5-minute walk the first day, and maybe adding a minute the next day, and really just taking those small steps, putting those small practices into play to slowly desensitize from that habit that's gluing us to the couch or gluing us to social media. And it's easier said than done, right? Because ultimately it has to come from the inside out in terms of the person trying to make the change, even if they don't recognize that they want to make the change. As they start feeling the positive impact of some of those other behaviors, they're hopefully going to shift focus. That's what we hope to have happen. And again, easier said than done because, unless you're with your mom in those situations, trying to help her shift gears, it's very hard to do over the phone. But putting those messages out there and starting that conversation is really really the first step.
Can you share a particularly inspiring story, whether it's with a patient and the research you've done, that highlights the power of resilience?
So, gosh, I'm thinking about a client of mine, not Total Health, who came in really beat down, feeling quite depressed, quite anxious, had been a high-level triathlete in years past, and really had this dream of resuming her her competition in triathlon, and really didn't believe it was possible. And so over time, in coaching combined with therapy, we really worked to chip away at those limiting beliefs. And this individual got back at it and has started to compete at a very high level again, and came down to putting habits back in place, believing in the possibility, taking steps, getting support when things got challenging, and really working through the obstacles until they got to where they wanted to be. And it all came down to building at the core a resilient mindset, which is now translated into a resilient lifestyle where, you know, they're doing something that they once loved in a new way, understanding that, it's possible to adapt, change, and still flourish.
I think one of the cornerstones or bedrocks of resilience is to be able to maintain your routine no matter how tough or great a situation gets. You still focus on the core things you've committed to doing every day. For me, it's really tough to stay committed to my gym routine. I will find every reason not to get to the gym. And so I think I lack resilience when it comes to working out. I know I'm not alone in that. What's your advice to folks like us on that habit building?
Yeah, and that's a very real consideration as well. The big piece of it is for the benefits to outweigh the not doing, right? And so what we hope is by taking those small steps forward and framing it in your mind is, okay, I don't have to go. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, but any movement is going to help me feel better, and trying to focus on that reality and then internalizing and really focusing in on how it is you do feel. And that will help you to build momentum to continue going to the gym or to get to the gym in the first place. So it's a question of, through small steps, building momentum and really taking that all or nothing piece out of the equation. So, if you feel like you have to have an hour workout at the gym for it to be worth it, not true. You can go for 20 minutes and still get a benefit. And then really taking the time to step back and thinking about, well, how do I really feel now? And how did I feel yesterday when I didn't go? And hopefully you're going to be able to internalize the benefits of having been, and that will help you continue to move forward.
It's also interesting. I recently heard a talk on making it easier for you to do the right decisions, right? So for me, for example, I picked a gym on my way to work. So I have to walk by it. Why not detour for 5 or 10 minutes and just go inside and then go for a walk on a treadmill and then start running? And I found that just taking that little step each time does make it more part of my day. Similar to options when you're eating. If you keep healthy food in your fridge, you're likely to eat healthier. So it's those tiny changes in your day-to-day that can help support a better routine or your goals in your routine. What are some other tips that you would give your patients?
Well, yeah, so it's those habits, right? That were those micro habits that are going to foster routine and progress. And then, really reflecting on what's working and what's not working, and thinking about this idea of progress, not perfection. Really, really important. And, getting an accountability buddy, somebody that you can kind of talk with about the changes that you're trying to make. And maybe they're trying to make the same changes or different changes, but just that social support angle in it all is very, very important. And also, going back to sort of the managing your stress response piece, that's really, really helpful in building and maintaining progress towards change, helping us stay motivated. Because when we're really stressed out at this level, it's really hard to shift gears and add something new into the routine or do something different. So the power in managing our stress response is really far reaching. And so that's a big piece of what I would say as well. So it's the small steps, It's the eliminating the all or nothing. It's the social support, and it's the managing our stress response.
I'm sure you also hear about common misconceptions when you're discussing resilience with people and you're getting pushback or reasons why it won't work for them. So, what are some of those misconceptions or reasons that you have to navigate or help clients navigate?
Right. Well, so a couple things come to mind with that question, and the pushback around, well, forget it, that won't work for me, is real, and I hear that all the time, and it's really a question there of, you know, fostering that therapeutic alliance and trying to understand the client's experience as best as possible, and then find those little cracks in the what's being presented to see if you might be able to float another idea or possibility out there and see if the client will take hold of that. And that really is a process of change that's fostered by a strong therapeutic alliance, and the client knowing that you care about understanding their experience and where they're coming from. So that's a piece of it. And then the reality of helping them to focus on progress, not perfection, and helping them see that, taking one step forward, even if they're not hitting their goal yet, is so worth it because they're making progress towards where they actually want to go. And I think taking away that black or white, all or nothing thinking, over time, again, through understanding their experience, is really an important place to start and focus.
Major transitions can cause really large shifts in your routine, in your sense of self-worth, and in your emotional confidence. As we age, I've seen it with my own dad, for example. When he finally decided to retire, he didn't really retire with a plan. And it really was a shock to his everything. He suddenly lost, his routine. His entire identity was in wrapped around his career and his profession. And so over the last few years, it's been a challenge helping him find his new normal. What is your advice to older adults on being resilient and prepared through transitions so that they can tackle them head on, whether it be retirement or a new diagnosis or a loss of a loved one?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, a very real experience for so many people, right? And you mentioned it, it comes down to helping these clients to establish and integrate a new sense of normal, and this takes time, because oftentimes there's this huge shift in identity and huge shift in routine and shift in experience, and maybe they're living in a brand new place. It's a lot to contend with and navigate. So again, comes down to a strong therapeutic alliance, in that we're making it clear to our clients that we care about their experience and trying to understand where they're coming from. And then slowly over time, helping them, because we want this all to come from the inside out, right? To help them identify areas of new focus where they can perhaps connect. And it might be a little bit of trial and error, Maybe it's going to the senior center across the street. Maybe it's trying water aerobics. Maybe it's an art class or a book group, or just helping them to cultivate ideas for connection where they can start to build that new foundation, that new normal, as they move forward.
One of the things that you talk about is finding the extraordinary within the ordinary. And it's interesting because when I reflect on my dad and his attitude towards life, he has this mission of just keep moving. So every hour he's up to something new, and quite the opposite of my mother, who will just sit there and be on Facebook. And so I really admire my father on his commitment to movement and moving and staying active. And I think that is extraordinary, to be so dedicated to that. How can folks really look at their own life and identify the things they're really good at and use those as their superpowers? Like, what's your advice to those people to think about their current life and figure out how they can be more extraordinary?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And the thing is, right, it's this idea of using our strengths to help us flourish, help us maximize our potential within our own unique context. And so really helping our clients through exploration and discussion to identify their strengths. Maybe it's a old strength or something they haven't done or used in quite a while that we can help them to get in touch with again and put into play in a certain way, right? And it's really an individual process of uncovering, well, where are your strengths? And oftentimes, particularly with older adults, they might have lost track of or lost touch with where their passions are, where their strengths are, what they're really good at. And maybe we can, through our work, help them get back in touch with those things and use them in a way or plug them in a way that's going to help sort of bolster their whole experience of life and kind of help them experience life in a different way. And that's all a part of the process of creating a new sense of normal, right? And so really engaging in that process. But the point you make about using strengths to help us manage through and beyond challenge and help us flourish is huge, because it really does come down. I mean, a lot of my work is based in a strengths perspective, a solution-focused strengths perspective, to help folks really lock into a place that feels comfortable and good to them in terms of where they are in their life.
In addition to the strengths, wouldn't you say that having a curiosity or an interest in learning and picking up new skills can also improve resilience? When you work with older adults, what are some of the exercises you do or you find useful that our audience can try at home?
Yeah, that is a great question, because absolutely curiosity, being curious about what's happening around you and thinking about, ways that you can engage in activities or, cultural events or community events that maybe are new to you and that you haven't done before, can be really uplifting and can really help all of us, but particularly older adults, to feel a sense of belonging, a sense of meaning in their life. And that's another thing that's so important, is helping folks to find those connections which foster a sense of purpose and meaning. Because, so much of life comes down to that idea of purpose and meaning. And oftentimes I find that with some of my older clients, that sense is buried behind something or some experience, lost in some way. So to help connect with that sense of purpose and meaning through curiosity is extremely powerful.
It's so interesting, right? Because also the generation above us spent so much time and energy and effort providing for their kids. I know my parents probably sacrificed a lot of their personal goals and ambitions to provide as first generation, as immigrants to the country. And now that they're retiring, I'm starting to see other interests that I didn't even know existed. How do you help older adults build new dreams or plan for new experiences, like similar to what you've done with children and athletes in setting new goals?
Yeah, and it's a step-by-step process, right? starts with understanding who that person is and where they're coming from to the best extent possible through that therapeutic alliance. And then helping them through conversation, through the therapeutic process to hone in on interests, passions, and then consider ways of plugging those in. And it's a process that takes time. It's not and the other piece that's really important, it's not a one size fits all. So that's where that strong therapeutic alliance comes in, because, there's no formula for this. It's a process that has to unfold over time, and helping folks to kind of get in touch with and notice the momentum that they're building through those small successes, through those connections one at a time that they're making, is so important. And so that's really how I help them to engage in and hopefully move that process forward.
What are some of the other mechanisms that you identify in your book, Bounce, that can help older adults navigate challenges and build that resilience?
Right. Yeah. And so I'm really glad you asked that question about Bounce, because, I wrote Bounce sort of through the lens of the younger child. But what I say to folks in all my interviews about the book is that all the principles laid out in the book apply to all of us across the lifespan. And so, the ones that I really, would sort of focus on with the older adult in mind. I mean, I would really focus on all of them, actually, but, it's this idea of holding on to optimism, holding on to this idea of possibility on the other side of challenge, the possibilities that exist within the next phase of our lives, right? So that's a big one. And we foster that through gratitude, through, as we've already talked about, staying in touch with identifying the things that are going well and not just focusing on the negatives or the challenges. So that's really, really key. But also, going up to my second principle in Bounce, understanding and appreciating individual difference. That really kind of helps us to focus on appreciating our own unique context and that of others without that piece of comparison. And with really, with kids in mind, I'm thinking more about kind of bullying and not tearing other people down to make ourselves feel good. But for the older adult, it really evolves into this place of appreciating who we are and building our context within the reality of who we are, such that we can flourish and maximize our potential. And then, of course, there's the managing emotion and tolerating frustration, which circles back really largely to the modulating our stress response, and making sure that we're not going to escalate to the point of shutdown when we hit a challenge. And then, there are others, but those are the ones that I would really highlight in relation to the older adult.
Dr. Lund, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on this show. Thank you for sharing your invaluable insights and experiences. It's quite obvious that the work you've done has had a profound impact on clients, and hopefully our audience can walk away with a few great nuggets of things that they can apply to their day-to-day.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
Listeners, if you're inspired by today's conversation, visit www.totallife.com to learn more about therapy and sign up for resources that can help you age healthier. Remember, it's never too late to start taking care of your mental health and staying engaged. Stay mindful, stay healthy, and keep thriving. Until next time, this is Neelam Brar signing off.